we go to all these different cities around the globe because we're seeing that startups, like one's in Africa or one's in Israel or Canada or Australia, and then certainly here in the US, places like New Orleans. There's a lot of great activity. There's a lot of great entrepreneurs who have amazing ideas. They're not in Silicon Valley. Maybe they're going to go there to help raise capital. They're going to raise capital here in DC or New York and elsewhere. But by and large, what we're seeing with all these startups all over the globe is that they have these incredible game-changing ideas, but because they're not in Silicon Valley, the thought has been, oh, well, they're not doing those game-changing things.
I think if you go around this country on a bus and ask people at a place in, pick your place, Des Moines, they do not have the same issues and concerns that you hear about in San Francisco and New York or Washington, D.C. They're much more concerned about these issues of safety, much more concerned about an opportunity gap where there's some of these great successes have essentially created great wealth, but not created a lot of jobs, indeed sometimes hollowed out jobs, and the middle class has been hollowed out. That is just factually true. And so I think this next generation of entrepreneurs in this third wave will not just be creating wealth. I think they're going to be focused on creating jobs. And the last stop we did in New Orleans, I think, was telling in two respects. One ties in what they were saying. I heard several times at New Orleans, not just from one person, that we care about New Orleans, the community, first, and our specific startup second. Remarkable. Hadn't heard that in other places. And of course they care about their company. Of course they care about their investors. Of course they care about their employees. Of course they care about their customers, everything. But they also were in it together. It goes back to this African proverb. We're going to go together. We're going to figure out some way to lift New Orleans up and make it an entrepreneurial hub. And that's why there's momentum there. But there's a second aspect of New Orleans that is striking, particularly as we come up in August on the 10th anniversary of Katrina, which was a horrible tragedy. Horrible tragedy. People were displaced, a lot of people died, just horrible tragedy. But out of that tragedy, they were forced to reinvent the city. They were forced to rethink schools, for example. They were forced to kind of lean into the future. And the momentum now that was, I'm told, not there pre-Katrina around some of these issues around innovation, entrepreneurship, and around learning other things is remarkable. And so I think it's an example. There are people that 10 years ago after Katrina, there are many people who said, well, we should just leave New Orleans. This is, this is too hard. But there are some people who said, no, we should stay in New Orleans. Actually, 1,000 people moved to New Orleans just as part of Teach for America because they wanted to be part of that renaissance, part of that reinvention. You see that in Detroit as well. There are some people who run from Detroit because, as I mentioned, 60, 70 years ago, Silicon Valley lost 60% of its population, went bankrupt. There are many parts of Detroit that are scary. A lot of people run away. Some people run to the battle, run to the opportunity, and the momentum around, particularly what's happening now in the downtown Detroit area, around startups and entrepreneurship is remarkable. And so that's, I think, the story in all these different communities. We've seen across all these different Rise of the Rest cities. It's people saying we can do better, saying if we work collectively and figure out ways to work as a community, we can actually have an impact. We can lift up the community. We can give it more hope, create more opportunity. And it was remarkable to see. But it starts with people exactly what you're saying, of course I should focus on my company. Of course I need to be successful for all the reasons I mentioned. But if we can lift all the boats, that benefits me. That makes it easier for me to attract capital. That makes it easier for me to attract talent because people aren't going to just come to New Orleans in this case. For my company, they're going to make a decision to move there with all kinds of family considerations, other considerations. They have to believe the region is rising. They're not going to bet on a company. They're going to bet on a region.
So, Louis, what's going on in New Orleans? Why is it such a hotbed of innovation?
Well, I think to Steve's point, I think everything that we do and other organizations like us in New Orleans, we're there to make sure that New Orleans doesn't miss out on jobs in the next wave because we're a big city. We've got about 400,000 people in the city, more than 1 million people in the very close-in suburban parishes, and we don't want to send smart people to Houston, Dallas, and Atlanta to get good jobs in tech. And like you were saying earlier, these aren't big companies anymore. They're not just banks or travel companies or airlines. They're all technology companies. And those are very important skills that people are cultivating in our area. We just want to make sure that they can continue to grow those skills. And then also, maybe if they're working for GE, who's hired 200 people in New Orleans, or another bigger company, they're going to have an idea and they're going to start their own business. So we not only want to make sure that smaller and larger businesses can come to town, but we also want to make sure that they keep the real smart folks who will come up with the next idea in our area.